Melanie Rickey is a journalist, podcaster, and the founder of the Enoughness Movement, encouraging all of us to find our just right amounts of health, wealth, and well-being. She's recently joined Good Housekeeping as style director, a great compliment to the enoughness work she does, providing her with a platform to articulate how style, enoughness, and the world of sustainable fashion can find a sweet spot. Today, we hear about what brought her here and what it feels like to be on the edge of something very new and exciting.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosna. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the Career Equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Career Equation podcast. And today, I'm delighted to be here with journalist, broadcaster, ex-fashion director, and the creator and founder of the Enoughness Movement and the Enoughness podcast, Melanie Rickey. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Erica.
It's lovely to have you here. And of course, we're going to have a chance through the equation to explore a bit about your career trajectory and history that's brought you here. But let's start off with the enoughness. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is and why people might want to engage in the enoughness movement?
Okay, thanks for having me on here today. I'm really excited to go through the career equation. So the enoughness is a project that I started when recovering from addiction and recent ADHD diagnosis, and after many, many years chasing more and working in the fashion industry, I had this enormous penny dropping moment where I realized that culture doesn't want us to stop wanting ever, and that we're on this treadmill of more. The research that I began to undertake began to expose many other cultures in the world, like Sweden, Finland, Bhutan, India, where enough and enoughness as an idea is a way of life, whereas here we don't even have a word for it. Enoughness isn't in the dictionary, it's like a derivation of enough, whereas somewhere like Sweden has lagom, which means not too little, not too much, just right. Finland's been voted the happiest nation on earth for 7 years because when you know what is enough, you're happy. And phrases, like I've had elegant sufficiency went out with the Victorians. So I'm kind of trying to bring back this idea that having exactly what you need and nothing more is the most delicious place to be in life.
I love that. Exactly what you need and nothing more. And I think in so many ways, this is nourishing both to us as individuals, but also to the planet. Particularly in Western society, have way more than we actually need and are constantly striving for an excess that has the illusion that it's going to make us in some way happier. And I feel like as I get kind of older and maybe a little bit wiser, I really start to see how much that is pushed, that actually anything that is about having more than I need is feeding my sense that I in myself am not enough and that what I have is not sufficient. So I think this is a really, really powerful idea and one that I'm sure a lot of people are going to benefit from getting behind. So thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you.
Of course, we ask people to come on with a little bit of a career conundrum, something about what's my next stage? Where am I going to take myself? And what might be standing somewhat in my way? So I'd love to hear what would be most useful in terms of this conversation? What insight would you like to generate for yourself, Melanie?
Well, I suppose my big conundrum is I've worked for newspapers, magazines, writing for online and print since the beginning of this century, essentially when I graduated. And I suppose it's how do I shift from being a sort of working journalist in the sort of, let's say, print and digital reading sphere and take that skill set into broadcast journalism and building a movement, and what skills can I bring from my older career and what new ones do I need to develop to ignite what I need to happen in the next couple of years with this project.
Perfect. And I think this is such a good question for anyone who's making a career shift, whether it's wholesale to something completely different. In your case, something related. You already have a journalistic background. You're a good storyteller. You know how to put something together that's well thought through and engaging for somebody. But you're changing your medium and you're changing your subject matter.
I'm stepping out of my lane. I'm stepping out of my lane and kind of taking a whole new punt in a new direction.
Yeah. And we're going to ask then, so what are you going to take with? What do you want to leave behind? And how do we help you to develop and evolve a sustainable, exciting, structured way of working in this new landscape and with the ambitions that you've got around that too?
That would be wonderful.
Okay, let's see what we can do around that then. And we'll use the equation formulas to do that. So let's just recap what the equation is for people. So the career equation framework came about as a result of many, many discussions over 20 years of career conversations with people, and really underpinning what is it that matters for people when they talk about thriving or being happy and fulfilled in their career. And we describe a thriving zone as 4 components of the equation, but you could just think about them as like 4 boxes, blobs, areas of interest. And they're this. Number 1, place your skills and strengths. We all are happiest when we identify a skill and strengths that we enjoy using, and then we aim to get better and better at mastering that. Second, we want to apply that to something that we enjoy, that gives us pleasure, that we care about, that we're enthusiastic about. And that could be a subject area, like enoughness, or it could be a way of being, like making connections with people or diving deep into my research. So it's things that just feel like they give us energy and pleasure. And we want to apply those 2 things to get a result that matters to us. We call that impact. So how do you define and measure success in your career? And for so many of us, playing into enoughness, it seems to be about more money, more power, more status. That's what we're told should matter. But actually, over thousands of career conversations, I can tell you that that isn't the way that people really measure their impact in life. It's a way of keeping score, but it's not the impact in itself. And the last component is to say you can have all 3 of those things, but if you don't have an environment that really brings out the best in you, it can bring out the worst. It can be really, really challenging. So a job might look like a great fit, but if the environment doesn't support you to thrive, it can lead to all sorts of things from burnout and ill health and a lack of performance, really because we're a square peg in a round hole and the environment doesn't suit. So just like plants have environments that they do best in, a cactus does best in an arid environment. If we put a cactus into a very marshy or boggy environment, it's just not going to thrive. So how do we learn to pinpoint the kind of environmental factors that make the biggest difference in our career? And when we have these 4, we can say to be thriving. So to help us to unpack this a little bit, I ask people to give us a moment that relates to each of these 4. And we start with strengths and skills. So I'd love to hear a little bit about a story, a moment in time in your own life where you discovered that you had a natural strength and aptitude for something that was going to be valuable. Tell us a bit about that.
I think it is the ability, or my ability as a child, to power through a really difficult childhood and come out of it somewhat intact, full of ambition and drive that was never really shown to me by anybody. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My mother had problems. She's a lot better today. She's wonderful. But for most of my childhood and teenage years, I was dealing with a mum who was drinking. And I somehow found that I was able to study and kind of work my way out of my situation. I knew that if I just kept working and finding something that I felt passionate about, it would be my ticket out of there. And I relentlessly searched for it and found it and studied my ass off, and then got my first internship and didn't look back. And that kind of was the first proof point that drive, passion, and, throwing yourself into something, for want of a better word, could get me out, because my academic kind of success faltered and struggled in the middle part because I didn't have the support I needed at the time.
That's such a powerful story. And thank you for sharing that, because I think for so many of us, our childhood, one way or another, is really powerfully formative. And in your story, you really talk about what it takes to have the grit, the determination, the foresight to say, this isn't how I want my life to be, and it's challenging and it's difficult, but another world awaits me. And if I can apply my focus, my ability, and the confidence to know that you had that in a way that's going to see me through, then there's going to be more for me out the other side of that.
Yeah, it was blind faith at the start there, but I just kept going. And that kind of first wind of my career really did last me until my early 30s.
Wow, that's really a pretty impressive swoop out the gate of childhood and through university and into some really, really interesting opportunities. Let's hear a bit more about those. Tell me about a time when you really enjoyed the work you were doing. I'm guessing that there were some real peak moments. Let's hear a little bit about one of those.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because my first job was on a newspaper called The Independent, which was at the time the smallest circulation newspaper in Britain, which was around about 400,000 copies per day. I mean, this is, a long, long time ago now. Then each successive job I got was on a bigger circulation newspaper. In the end, I went from there to the Daily Telegraph and ended up at the Sunday Times, which had an enormous circulation, ridiculous. Then the magazine was called Style, and I was, one of the leading fashion editors on it. And it went into 7 million homes a week.
Wow.
Well, 7 million pairs of eyes
on it. I still read it now. Nobody reads papers anymore.
When I read it online now, but the impact of the things you would write. So there's, when you're in a job, you're doing it because you want to share information, tell stories, enlighten people, and share great things that you find. But then with the Sunday Times, the impacts of those stories would be the business owners would be like, oh my gosh, you've changed my life. Or people would pick up on a thing you've done or a person that you've spoken about. And, it would improve and make them happier or make them feel they've discovered something. Or, it was kind of entertaining. It was design. There was so much going on around the early kind of 2000s. And I was very young, so it was a very heady time. And also to add something into culture at a time when fashion was very much, Britain was leading the way in so many ways. It was very exciting.
Yeah.
Time.
It sounds incredibly exciting. It sounds like fun. There was lots of this obvious passion and enjoyment there. There's flair and the opportunity to have influence, to really get into people's homes, get into people's wardrobes and to support businesses and have a transformational impact, perhaps, without you even anticipating that might be the case. That was something that happened. That must have been a very joyful experience in many ways.
It was a great thing to be young and to be doing that was real young. And it couldn't be further from what I ever imagined my life could be like. So I couldn't believe my luck in so many ways. And I just went along for the ride and didn't really think about consequences or the impacts of the things in terms of fashion or, no one really talks about the environment at that time. It didn't cross our minds. All the things we think about today, impacts, environment, climate, well-being, all of those things. It was just fun. And that was how it was framed, which in a way, the best of it still is.
Yes. I suppose in some ways our sort of sobering arc about the impact that we're having around the environment and one another and treating one another's like bodies and feelings with respect has also led to a certain sort of sobriety in what we enjoy. And, I really get that, when I get the chance to sort of see a fashion show and those, because there is a real joy explosion about just the creativity and the magic and fun of it that perhaps we're a little bit more guarded around, a decade or two later. So it's an interesting move.
Just saying what's interesting is back in the like 20 years ago, fashion shows, I could tell you who was going to be attending the catwalk shows. There were a handful of editors from each country, the hierarchies of the magazines. And, it's still like that today, it's still quite closed shop. But in the interim period, it's exploded, it's become entertainment. Everyone can have a part of it, which is wonderful. But the flip side of that is that it's just got bigger. It's earning more money that needs to then get bigger and earn more money. And, there's kind of a bubble that's popping in the fashion industry. There are big businesses going out of business. There's profit warnings because nothing can grow forever. There has to be some sort of correction. And I feel like my early days of that work was when the industry had a right size to it.
Yeah, there was a proportionality to it, which I guess feeds into some of the agenda around Enoughness now, as well as having more conscious about that proportionality and that, things cannot just continue to go. We cannot keep utilizing materials the way that we have been doing as well. And of course, then there becomes another industrial revolution about like recycling, reusing, about vintage, about, and that can be joyful too. So let's talk a bit about this idea of impact. So I ask about a time when you knew that what you were doing really mattered. It really landed in a way that was meaningful for you. Can you think of a time?
I mean, it's hard now with the lens I have today to look back and think, how can being a fashion editor genuinely have impact. I mean, you're offering up options for people to buy. You're certainly having an impact on the people that you're supporting's work. But I think the most impact I think I've had was my work behind the scenes in the fashion industry. I was always very much about supporting young emerging talent, because I feel like there's so many people in fashion that don't come from backgrounds of money, that don't necessarily know the routes in the door. I was lucky enough to find my way in through, relentless annoying of people probably. But I worked on something called New Gen, which is the new part of the British Fashion Council, for about 8 years. And we mentored young designers, people, J.W. Anderson, who's now the creative director of Loewe, Christopher Kane, Erdem, Roxander, and many more. And for a short time, I had my own initiative, which is called Future British, which was for young accessory designers or one product who created one product that they were very, very good at. And I mentored a lot of people there. And that, I think, is the most impact. And in fact, yesterday I received an email from one of those people who has just been given an OBE.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
So that, to me, is that behind the scenes work of supporting, help getting funding and giving platforms to young emerging designers. That's where I've had the most impact.
Yeah, I can really see how championing talent that is non-traditional might really strike a chord for you and be incredibly valuable. And it's a cutthroat industry. It's a really tough industry, and an industry, I imagine, where, network can be all. So to be a door opener, to be an enabler, to be someone who holds the hand of people as they move through. And then to see, some of these, like Erdem are household names, they're like really remarkable brands that have grown in sustainable ways. So that's nice to be part of a journey and see that results over time.
What's interesting is I've always been at the start of things for people, but I always used to ask myself in my career, why is it that I'm not there down the line? Like, what is it that's missing from what I have to offer in my career that stops me being able to show them the next road along? And I think that talks back to my own kind of attempts at advancing my career to sort of, boardroom level, higher up than, sort of second in command type roles, because I didn't have the executive function to take me there. And when I discovered the ADHD diagnosis a year ago, I began to see, that's why there's sort of a missing link between getting everything up and running to keeping it going. And that's kind of the career equation that I'm now facing down, is that 20 years into a career, I'm now having a go at doing something on my own.
Yeah.
I've started up. I've got it off the ground. Yeah. How do I keep it on the road with the wheels turning? What do I have to bring to find that engine and to fill it with the right petrol and get it rolling?
Managers and recruiters, how often do you dismiss someone from your talent pool because you haven't considered their transferable skills? Hard knowledge of a sector is relatively easy to come by, but the aptitude to build relationships, or organise ideas, or influence others, these are largely built in. People have them or they don't. So often we've heard people say that they're really constrained by what other people think that they can bring. But it's clear, as Melanie has, that people make significant shifts all of the time. Keeping an open mind can help you secure a maverick.
I think it's very interesting, the point you make about being at the beginning of people's journeys. I'm very interested in personality profiling because it sort of sits along my career, sphere. And one of the things I found very interesting about the Myers-Briggs profile is that in each of the 4 different quadrants of personalities, the artisans, the strategists, the humanitarians, and the protectors or structurers, there is within those 4, the initiator, the grower, the maintainer, and the shutdowner. And I know that I'm very much an initiator, and many entrepreneurs naturally are. But then you see as businesses grow that actually they aren't so good at the growth and the maintenance phase. That almost you do need different personalities and different inputs to help to make that business sustainable along that growth path. And it would be easy to criticize oneself by saying, I should be able to do all 4 components, when actually they're quite distinct profiles of skill set. So, I hear you. And I also just want to give you that to say it may not necessarily, it may be a very strong strength and preference to something rather than chastising oneself for not having the complete package of all 4 personalities.
I can safely lay claim to initiator then.
Yeah, you definitely can. And be proud of that, But I guess that as we start to answer some of your questions, some of it might be, at what points do I need to bring in other skill sets where that is someone else's sweet spot? So I know I work alongside plenty of people who are definitely not initiators, but really good growers, finisher completers, much more orderly in their thinking than I am. So let's see if we can tease out some of that as a kind of valuable addition to your progress path. But let's talk about the last piece before we do, which is about environment really making the difference.
Yeah.
So I know that when you were at Grazia, you really felt you were part of like the zeitgeist. You're really capturing ideas and experiences and being at the heart of culture creation. But you also told me that sometimes that environment didn't always work in your favor, or you didn't always feel comfortable. Can you tell me a little bit about how something can be so wonderful and also challenging?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what was brilliant about Grazia was that it was a weekly title where we got together every morning around a table and we were like, what's happening today? Okay, right, this is going on, that's going on. Great. How are we going to respond to that? Great. Off we go. Let's go do it. Get it done. It's out the door, it's online, in a print, it's here, it's there. What's next? And that system of here it is, do it, get it out the door. Here it is, do it, get it out the door. Re-suited my personality. Re-suited wrapping up, as I like to say, wrapping up the moment in the pages of a magazine and putting it out into the world or online. And it was such a buzz, and we really did have an impact, and people really enjoyed reading us, and we had fun, and we were a dream team. After a while, and wanting to get to more senior roles, I began to see that the people in senior roles were much more kind of well organized than I was. I was a little bit more erratic. And because I think of my upbringing and being the child of alcoholics comes with all sorts of baggage. And, I began to experience self-doubt, problems. Why not me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why am I not good enough? And so I tried to kind of improve myself by shopping more, just trying to improve myself in as many ways as I could. And after some time, it began to undo me. And I began to develop a little bit of a habit of going out, drinking too much, and occasional party drug usage. It was a slow decline in my mental health, really. The thing that really made me thrive when I couldn't get any further with it, it really, it dismantled me a little bit. A bit of a problem, I was a bit of a liability, if I'm really honest, at certain times. I always tried to show up and do my job, but I just felt that I had failed somehow. And that was hard. It was really hard for me. I couldn't understand why. Now I do. I can see exactly what was going on. And it's just, I'm one of those people that if I knew then what I know now, things would have gone very differently. But, that's the life lessons that you bring with you.
Well, they say that life can only be understood backwards, but it has to be lived forwards. And it's a bummer, isn't it? But I think, I really hear that there's a real strength in ship it. You were really good at going, there is a deadline. We need to wrap things up. It needs to be at this level of caliber and idea and energy. And that is getting done. And I'm sure that you're using that loads to successfully transmit your work in the podcast. And I also hear you say something that's actually quite a common experience for technical professionals as well, which is I'm brilliant at the job on the ground, but then actually being promoted into the next level of managing the job is, again, a completely different skill set. And instead of promoting people in their specialism, we promote them to do something completely different, which actually sits in a different quadrant of capability. So you may well, as you say, like reflecting back, have gone, there were definitely things I could have done or ways I could have supported myself better to have more options around how I navigated that. But it's also really common experience that people are either frustrated in their ability to progress because actually the requirements of the progression seem to be outweighs the gifts that made them really good at the job in hand, or that they are promoted and they're promoted out of competence. And suddenly they were promoted because they were good at something, and the promotion they've gone into, they're not good at because it just doesn't sit around their skill set.
Exactly. And I think the fashion industry and fashion media, journalism, research writing is my first love. And, being on the ground, a technician, all of the things that it takes to do those things. The environment was kind of the icing on the cake, but there are not many jobs in that sphere.
Yeah.
To be fair. And when the people get into those senior roles, they will not leave.
Yes.
There's also, one of my favorite stories that I tell is when I first graduated from university, I remember the former editor of British Vogue is called Alexandra Shulman.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in my early 20s, she was the editor. And when I was in my mid-40s, she was also the editor. So, that's an entire career span with one person in the same job.
Yeah.
So, there's also all of that. But, at the time, I was like, how can I move on? How can I move? And, one of my regrets is that I stuck in sort of traditional media formats instead of going, the online world is where I should be. And
right.
certainly a lot of people from my side of things went into e-commerce and that kind of thing. And they've had huge successes of what they do. So I think flexibility and looking around me in a different way would have also benefited.
That's all good stuff. Anna Wintour, she's still around. She's still wearing a black sunglasses. I completely get that. You're right. It's literally a whole career span in one role. So I can imagine that kind of bottleneck can get extremely frustrating. And you described some of the behaviors and kind of self-sabotorial or even trying to self-comfort in some way about just the frustration of not being able to move forward within a relatively limited opportunity span. So let's see if we can draw out of what you've told some useful insights that make what we call a career design statement, the output of an equation.
Okay, I'm so fascinated by this career equation that there are 4 things you look at. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I don't know whether the stories I've told you are kind of giving enough of context, but let's see.
Let's see what we can do. We call this process a dirty draft because it's like the very first go and we invite people to continue to improve on it, but let's see what we can get out of it. So what's good is I'm going to ask you to fill in the gaps, and the first one is purely your name. So I'm going to say I, and you're going to say
Melanie.
Lovely. You're a winner already. We'll use my skills in. So now I want to know, listening to yourself back here, what are the fundamental skills you want to bring into this future with the enoughness?
So Melanie, I'm going to own that. So the skills I'd like to bring with me into the enoughness is forward planning. It's passion with strategy, end goals in sight, working back to get back here and then plot out how to achieve them. Get the message across and ignite people's interest that this is not a cringe idea. It's actually freedom and that you get everything you want, but you don't feel that siren call of pointless more stuff.
Yeah.
Because when you work out what, let's say, the perfect amount of skincare items you need, when you've got them, you can focus on something else, But if you're one of those kind of beauty obsessives that are always on the hunt for something, or, once you've got enough in certain areas, you go on and thrive in elsewhere.
Yeah.
Just how do I put that across? It's such a huge idea. I mean, every time I talk to anyone about it, we end up talking for hours about what it actually means. So it's distilling that and putting it into the world in a joyful way.
Nice.
That excites people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's choose some skills bits. And then we'll add some of those bits into passion and impact because it's already in there. So I heard skill-wise, my skill for forward planning, and you actually then said my passion for strategy that ignites people's interest. So if I go back to strengths in the list, because I think you've actually almost got your equation already, but what skills do you want to take in? Choose 2 or 3 of your fundamental superpowers.
Okay. Joining unexpected dots and repackaging them into a new way of thinking.
Okay. Lovely. Joining unexpected dots and repackaging them into a new way of thinking. And your passion for, what's the subject?
It's kind of my passion for living in finding the delicious sweet spot in life that works for you, that isn't relentless chasing after things that won't actually do anything for you, and not wasting time not feeling confident or not wasting time feeling less than, landing in this delicious place, owning it and then kind of telling people how to stay there, but in a lifestyle way, because people like to know. They keep being told or suggested, like, hey, this works. Instead of opening or reading, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and pushing a button for TikTok made me buy it, how about you decided what you wanted? And how about here's some suggestions for like what to want? And this is why we're suggesting this. And it's all in service to you and your well-being, not overpopulating the planet with waste, and your own self-empowerment and confidence. And, we haven't touched on the kind of personal problems that I kind of maybe mentioned. Sorry, I don't know whether I mentioned I went to rehab for addiction. Later, my ADHD diagnosis, I realized that I'd been living in the too much of things for most of my adult life. And we've been at that sort of hardest edge, pushing. And if I wasn't there, I was down at the bottom, not feeling good. So landing in that middle place and knowing what I needed, that was the kind of penny dropping moment. And that's what I show and share people with this project.
Great. So we've got skills in joining our unexpected dots and repackaging new ways of thinking, and a passion for finding that delicious sweet spot that really works for you. 2, and this is where impact comes in. And this is where I think your statements about giving models and tools that can help people to discern enough to something like that. What's the impact? Well, how will you know that this is successful? How would you describe it? Now we need some words for impact, the kind of result that will tell you that you know that you've been successful. And you talked about this idea of giving people models and frameworks and communicating an idea. How will you know that you've got there, that it's worked?
The impact, first of all, the meaning of it needs to be understood in culture. Second of all, that meaning needs to become celebrated, and that the impact of that understanding is going to inspire people to consume less, but better, and have better self-worth because they're doing that, and then still not feel like they're losing out. And it's kind of like a win-win situation where you choose better things, you choose to feel better because of it. And it's kind of a sort of virtuous circle, which I'm hoping ends up with some sort of flywheel effect that sort of is like a flame of enoughness that gets spread around, that people can get, and then like, oh, this is how I want to do life.
Yeah.
And I know that the people I've encountered that live this way are the happiest people I know, and the most fulfilled, and the people that have just kind of done the work and found their sweet spot for happiness.
Lovely.
And so that's my dream, is to kind of have a group and community of people that get this is such a good thing. But it's kind of not actually giving anything up. It's realizing that the way the world works today would have us all on a treadmill with a phone in front of us. If the powers that be had their way, we'd all be scrolling and buying and keeping the wheels of their commerce turning. But we need to take back our own power and take back our own agency to choose what we want.
So understand and celebrate enoughness to inspire people to consume less, but better.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And what would be the environmental factors? If we now said, what kind of environment is going to best support you to achieve what you want to achieve here and help you make it meaningful for people? What kind of things would you add to the sentence? An environment that works best for me.
I mean, an environment that's well populated with staff and funding would be fantastic.
Oh, yes.
So I'm going to manifest that. And ultimately, I need an environment where I have a team and that we have common goals, many channels to kind of put this information out there. And, that it's a going concern that becomes, part of culture in a good way. In the short term, it's me on my own with a small group of people I work with on freelance basis. And my intention is to grow and get funding.
Brilliant.
So that's really what I'm working towards now, is that there's only so much one person can do.
Yeah.
And you can't delegate everything and you can't do everything, but something of this importance needs support.
Great. So an environment with staff and funding where I have a team that has common goals and channels to spread the message to influence culture would work best for me.
Yeah.
And how do you feel hearing that? How does that help you to frame the question of what do I take with, what do I leave behind, and how do I create a sustainable environment around me?
I mean, the truth is, Erica, that's a dream that I've just told you. The reality is that on the day-to-day, I'm building the sort of foundations for that to happen. So what does an environment look like for me today? It's my desk at home. And that's where I'm working. And that's the only choice I have today.
So it's a work in progress. So in terms of like the score then for how well you're living that vision now, with 1 just at the beginning and 10 fully realized, where would you put yourself at the moment?
Well, I would say I've got the movement off the ground. I mean, that's a podcast. I've got a small following on social media. And, I'm at point 1 or 2.
Yeah, you're early. You begin. Yeah, it's exciting and it's new. And you are an initiator. You're natural to this first phase. So how would you identify what your next step is going to be like to move you towards 3 to 4? What's going to be happening next, do you think?
Well, what's happening next is I have written what I'm calling my Teddy talk, which is a junior TED talk, which I'm incredibly proud of, which I've delivered once. And I'm booking out to deliver it quite a few more times in the next 6 months.
Fantastic.
Then I am working on kind of improving my social media content and working with a strategist to plot out how I make enoughness kind of the word of the year 2077 and kind of embed its meaning in culture really successfully. Yeah. I've even rewritten its dictionary definition.
Oh, wow.
And it's up on my wall. And I'm just working to kind of make this the most exciting, aspirational thing in culture. I could say that 100 times and make it, but I believe it's possible and I believe people want it. People need it. And whenever I speak to anybody about it, it resonates deeply with them. And I know you've said that as much at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
So I suppose there's a bit of blind faith in my passion, but also I'm putting in lots of structure and kind of plot lines to keep that on track.
Yeah, it sounds like really that combination of your energy and communication skills and your deep belief and faith and your structure and ability to think forward and plan strategically is really going to pay off. All of those different components are going to come together. It's really exciting. You can hear Mel really have to work here to get clear about what she wants out of her new chapter. She's stepping outside of her comfort zone and attempting to put herself and her ideas in the spotlight. She's also championing and educating to a new cultural idea, that of enoughness. It's really common for us to have to work hard alongside our coaching clients to help them to crystallize their vision of what they want to amplify, articulate, and share about themselves and their careers when they need to get to clarity about a whole new identity. When you talk back to your little self who really had to strive to make something happen, something remarkable happen in her life, what advice would you give her now?
I would say don't give up too soon and keep one foot in front of the other, because I think as a younger person, if I felt rejected or unloved, it would really undo me. I would feel really lost. And I've since learned about something called rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is a symptom of ADHD, where I took things so incredibly personally that it would derail me for days. So now I would advise younger me to stay strong and to kind of keep my self-talk positive.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And such a valuable message for so many of us. So we will check out the Enoughness podcast. We can find you also on LinkedIn. We'll put that in the show notes. And I wish you every continued success with this, because I think this is really an idea whose time has come. And as someone with a history of tapping into the zeitgeist and communicating it to others, I have every confidence you're going to be successful in doing that.
Thank you, Erica. So do I. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast. Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes. Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential. enjoying your life and doing remarkable stuff.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success.
And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosna
And Zoe Schofield. Signing off.